We rip away the polished exterior and dive deep into the ruins of what was once sold as China's urban utopia. The towering high-rises that once glistened with promise are now falling apart, rotting from the inside out, becoming ticking time bombs for the very people who once called them home. Behind every cracked beam and collapsing wall lies a trail of corruption, neglect, and broken dreams. These buildings weren't just poorly built, they were Tofu-Dreg projects, slapped together with substandard materials and zero accountability. Families are now fleeing in fear, their futures shattered by greed and indifference. This isn't just urban decay, it's a betrayal of national scale. Join us as we uncover the tragic collapse of China's so-called housing miracle. The dream is dead, and the nightmare has begun. In many places across China, modern apartment towers are disintegrating before our eyes. Walls split open, like secrets exposed. Ceilings drip foul-smelling water, while steel supports rot inside crumbling concrete. These aren't ancient relics. They're buildings less than 10 years old, now condemned and abandoned. What was marketed as modern progress has turned into a Tofu-Dreg disaster, with some towers collapsing under the weight of their own shoddy construction. The myth of China's unstoppable housing boom is imploding, leaving behind ghostly ruins and devastated homeowners. For over 20 years, China launched one of the greatest building frenzies in human history. Steel and concrete reshaped skylines from rural towns to megacities. Skyscrapers soared skyward, promising prosperity and progress. By 2020, China had consumed more cement in 3 years than America did in the entire 20th century. But behind the steel and glass facade was a time bomb of bad planning and reckless ambition. It all changed in 2008. When the global economy faltered, Beijing turned to construction to keep things afloat. Local governments, judged by GDP growth, turned infrastructure into a race. Buildings were thrown up at breakneck speed, with safety, quality, and sustainability tossed aside. Developers cut corners everywhere, from materials and design to labor and safety. Entire cities sprang up overnight, many with no residents, no planning, and no future. They called it growth. But underneath the surface, it was a hollow shell, numbers propped up by concrete and lies. The rot begins at the roots. After 2008, local officials were under enormous pressure to deliver fast growth, mostly through land deals and property development. Developers, hungry for profit, built fast and cheap. Cement was watered down, steel was reduced or skipped altogether. Basic systems like drainage and ventilation barely worked. Building inspections became rubber stamps, bought and paid for with bribes. Corruption ran deep, and families were handed keys to homes that were already doomed. These weren't homes for generations. They were time-limited products designed to survive a decade at best. In Junga, a 31-floor tower completed just 6 years ago became a nightmare. Within 2 years, leaks stained the walls. Cracks opened around windows, doors jammed shut, and hallways warped. Then, pieces of plaster fell from the 19th floor stairwell, narrowly missing a child. Videos went viral on Weibo before being swiftly censored. Management brushed it off as normal settling. In Guang, a 9-year-old building began to tilt in 2023. Families were rushed into temporary shelters without compensation. Investigators later found that key foundation supports were skipped to save costs. In Suzhou, luxury condos promised elite living. Just 4 years after handover, tiles peeled off and balconies rusted through. Homeowners who invested millions are now stuck in worthless husks. In Kunming, residents of a 28-story high-rise felt their building sway violently during a windstorm in 2022. Engineers called it conditionally safe, but residents were left shaken. The developer blamed the weather and refused refunds. What's happening across China isn't a collection of isolated building failures. It's a systemic unraveling driven by a feverish obsession with speed and appearances. Entire city blocks were thrown up in less than 18 months, built by undertrained laborers with little to no oversight. By early 2024, Even the Ministry of Housing and Urban Rural Development sounded the alarm, issuing a rare warning about the risks of reckless construction. But by then, it was far too late. Thousands of occupied towers were already ticking time bombs. Maintenance? Almost non-existent. Developers vanished post-sale, leaving underfunded property managers to deal with cracked walls, leaking pipes, and broken elevators. With no repair funds set aside, residents are left footing massive bills, on top of their 30-year mortgages. Social media platforms like Weibo and Douban are overflowing with horror stories. Sewage bubbling up into kitchens, staircases splitting apart, entire buildings reeking of mold and decay. Desperate and ignored, residents in some cities have formed grassroots inspection groups, crawling through crawl spaces, photographing damage, and pooling money for emergency repairs. In Hunga, drone footage from late 2023 revealed a haunting skyline. New towers, no older than a decade, already abandoned and crumbling, their facades cracked open like wounds, weeds growing from concrete seams. First, growth at any cost. Real estate drove China's economic boom. Local officials chased GDP by pushing rapid construction, trading quality for speed. Skyscrapers rose in under 2 years, built with recycled designs and unskilled labor. No one cared what came after. Second, corruption. Developers and officials traded land approvals for bribes. Safety checks were rigged or skipped. Weak cement, flimsy steel, and poor waterproofing became standard. Whistleblowers were ignored. Families unknowingly moved into dangerous homes. Third, no maintenance. After selling, developers disappeared. Underfunded property managers avoided repairs, with no legal requirement for reserve funds. Residents must cover costs, but courts offer little help. Buildings continue to rot, broken elevators, leaking roofs, and collapsing beams left unchecked. For millions of Chinese citizens, owning a home was more than shelter. It was a dream, a symbol of stability and success. Families saved for decades, borrowed from relatives, and went into lifelong debt to buy these apartments. Now, that dream is collapsing around them. In Nanjing, 67-year-old retired teacher Ms. Zhang lives in fear as cracks spread through her 8-year-old unit. Her elevator has been out of service for months, forcing her to climb 14 floors with groceries. She can't afford to leave, and there's nowhere safe to go. In Wuhan, anxious parents pull their kids out of schools near deteriorating towers. In some homes, beds have been moved away from sagging ceilings to avoid falling plaster. Health issues are rampant. Mold-induced respiratory problems, skin allergies, chronic fatigue. Injuries from falling debris are rising. And compensation, when granted, is laughable. Mere symbolic payouts that change nothing. In Xi'an, a 70-year-old widow was found alone in an unheated, waterless unit, forgotten by both family and the system. While wealthier residents quietly flee to newer neighborhoods, the poor remain trapped. Entire communities are hollowing out. Once bustling residential zones are now eerily silent. Windows dark, balconies empty, lobbies abandoned. Vertical ghost towns. Banks are staring down a tsunami of defaults. Homeowners can't pay, and developers are vanishing into bankruptcy. Local economies are stalling. A deep cultural belief that real estate is a path to wealth and security is disintegrating. In second-tier cities, buyers now ask only one thing. How old is the building? Young couples hesitate to buy. Parents stop pushing their children to join the property ladder. The foundation of generational prosperity is cracking. Some developers have already begun secretly demolishing unsold buildings, not to rebuild, but to erase the evidence of failure. A cover-up in plain sight. What's collapsing isn't just steel and concrete, it's trust. The Chinese government staked its legitimacy on delivering prosperity through growth. Homeownership was supposed to be a promise kept. Now, residents feel abandoned. Online, censored posts on Weibo and Douban chronicle daily humiliations, exploding water pipes, black mold, sagging floors. In Shenzhen, homeowners protesting outside a developer's office in 2023 were quickly dispersed. Media coverage was scrubbed. It tells a story of a system more interested in appearances than answers. of a government unwilling to face the consequences of its own policies. How can real estate remain the backbone of China's economy when its very foundations are crumbling? How can people trust a system that treats their suffering as a PR problem? This isn't slowing down, it's accelerating. From Beijing to third-tier towns like Zhengzhou, where a 6-year-old tower began falling apart live on social media, this crisis is spreading like rot behind drywall. In Guang, a tilting high-rise forced families into limbo with no plan, no answers, just silence. The collapse is no longer a possibility. It's already here. And it's not just physical, it's psychological, financial, and generational. A house was supposed to be a haven. In today's China, it's a trap.
Beijing is facing a collapse no one expected. Weekends that were once packed with traffic are now eerily silent. Shopping malls stand empty at 3 p.m., escalators humming with no passengers, and whole districts feel abandoned. Residents film video after video, stunned at how quickly the capital has sunk into a deep chill. As 2025 approaches its end, people say doing business in Beijing feels like fighting a losing battle. Even housing prices, long considered untouchable, have begun to slide. Stores that survived decades have shuttered overnight. Fangheng closed. Major 4S dealerships vanished. The once famous Beijing Ocean Museum, packed on weekends for years, suddenly stopped opening its doors. Sanlitun, once impossible to find a seat in, is now dotted with empty restaurants, half-cooked noodles, and desperate discount signs. 10 yuan group buy, please come in. Some streets in Wangfujing look like a weekday night during a blizzard, silent, vast, and echoing. Netizens ask, where did everyone go? No one has an answer. A city once defined by endless crowds, relentless energy, and the unmistakable rhythm of a global capital is now confronting a transformation so dramatic that even long-time residents struggle to recognize the city they have lived in for decades. On weekends, traditionally the busiest time of the week, the roads are shockingly quiet. People filming from their cars show multi-lane highways nearly empty in broad daylight. It doesn't feel like Beijing anymore, one resident says, his voice trembling with disbelief. It feels like the city is asleep. But this isn't sleep, it's decline, sudden and unmistakable. When the clock strikes 3 p.m., shopping malls across Chaoyang, Dongcheng, and Haidian temples of consumer life that once drew millions now resemble half-abandoned airports. Escalators run continuously, yet no one rides them. Clothing stores display new seasonal lines that no one browses. Food courts, once a noisy jungle of families and students, echo with the metallic hum of refrigerators. The videos circulating online show a Beijing that feels disconnected from its own past. Bright lights, full shelves, and empty walkways. Residents repeat the same haunting question. Where did all the people go? It is a question with no official answer, but one that carries deep emotional weight. Beijing, the political and cultural heart of China, has always been crowded, sometimes frustratingly so, yet that crowd was also a sign of opportunity, a symbol of life. The silence spreading through the city is what unnerves people most. It's not just emptiness. It's emptiness in places that were once impossible to access without pushing through waves of humanity. Among the most shocking closures is Fangheng Mall, a Beijing landmark that had survived multiple economic cycles. Its sudden shutdown, with little warning, sent ripples across the business community. Only Yingcheng Mall remains in the area, struggling to attract the customers Fangheng once brought in. Auto dealerships, once a symbol of rising middle-class wealth, have disappeared across multiple districts. The Beijing Ocean Museum, a beloved destination for families, closed without fanfare. Generations of Beijingers who remember long lines at its entrance now film videos showing padlocked doors and dust on posters that used to advertise new exhibits. Sanlitun, the nightlife and fashion capital of Beijing, tells its own heartbreaking story. Restaurants that once had lines stretching down the street now stand empty during dinner hours. Waiters linger at the entrance, holding menus with hopeful expressions that fade each time a potential customer walks past without stopping. Some shops are forced to sell meals for as little as 10 yuan just to bring in foot traffic. Deep discounts and group buy promotions flood Douyin, but even these can't fill the empty tables. The neighborhood that defined Beijing's urban lifestyle now looks like a place waiting for a new identity. Wangfujing and Wangjing, two areas that once represented Beijing's commercial might, are now symbols of decline. Wangfujing's iconic pedestrian street, usually a sea of shoppers, now shows long stretches with only a handful of people walking in the afternoon. Wangjing, previously branded as the second CBD and home to hundreds of thousands of residents, has turned eerily calm. A viral clip shows a 300-seat restaurant in which not a single table is occupied. The man filming pans the camera slowly, whispering, "This place used to be impossible to enter. And now look at it." Large supermarkets mirror the same emptiness. A 2-floor grocery store, fully staffed and fully stocked, has less than 5 shoppers at peak time. The owner says his business feels like a warehouse pretending to be a supermarket. Employees sweep spotless floors simply to keep themselves occupied. These videos gain millions of views because they reveal something people feel but rarely say aloud. Beijing is in decline, and it's visible everywhere. Wholesale markets, the backbone of the city's restaurant and retail industries, have experienced an unprecedented crash. Vendors claim that even toilet paper, bottled water, and household essentials no longer sell the way they used to. One merchant says 80% of their revenue used to come from food orders. Now even that has collapsed. The sudden shutdown of the popular Bullfrog World restaurant chain shocked locals. In multiple districts, delivery workers arrived for pickups only to discover kitchens abandoned mid-task, with ingredients left on counters and no staff in sight. Entire rows of restaurant storefronts, 5, 6, sometimes 10 in a line, are shuttered, plastered with eviction notices, or wrapped in chains. But the most devastating indicator of economic hardship lies in Beijing's office towers. Once a monument to ambition, innovation, and global capital, many of these skyscrapers now sit half-empty. Chaoyang's business district, known for its concentration of multinational corporations, shows vacancy rates between 16% and 46%, according to internal reports circulating online. Floors that used to house tech startups, financial firms, and education companies now gather dust. People film through glass doors, revealing abandoned meeting rooms, unplugged computers, and reception counters still covered with old pamphlets. It looks like companies left in a hurry and never returned. Haidian, the technological heart of China, has been hit even harder. After waves of layoffs in tutoring, tech, AI startups, and internet companies, entire buildings feel deserted. For years, Haidian was described as the brain of Beijing, a place where new ideas, capital, and talent interconnected. Today, signs of downsizing are visible everywhere: darkened windows, locked doors, empty lobbies, and hallways stripped of their once colorful startup branding. Living conditions for residents reflect the same downturn. Job seekers report sending out hundreds of resumes without hearing back. People over 30 feel especially vulnerable. "It's not that my ability is lacking," one woman says. "It's that companies don't even give me a chance to interview." Many who previously held stable professional roles now find themselves searching for lower-paying work or being told to consider selling insurance. Economic pressure pushes thousands into gig work, but even that market is oversaturated. Driving schools, once overwhelmed by demand, now sit nearly empty. Instructors reveal monthly salaries as low as 1,200 yuan. Migrant workers who made up 80% of previous learners are not coming to Beijing anymore. Without this population, not only the schools but the nearby markets, eateries, and rental communities all suffer. Entire microeconomies that relied on population inflow have begun to collapse. Beyond the numbers and closures, something intangible is fading: the spirit of Beijing. Places that once hosted street artists, music performers, festival crowds, and evening gatherings now feel lifeless. Shimao Tianjie, one of the most expensive residential areas in the city, has transformed into a public leisure space mostly used by elderly residents. Young adults, the group that fuels consumption, nightlife, and innovation, are noticeably absent. Their disappearance feels symbolic, like the draining of color from a once vibrant painting. Galaxy Soho, the architectural masterpiece designed to represent China's leap into the future, now symbolizes something very different. Inside its flowing white curves, wide corridors stretch quietly into the distance. Shops once filled with laughter and bright lights are closed. Children's play centers are locked. Ad screens show looping commercials to no audience. The surreal emptiness feels like walking through a futuristic city after humanity has moved elsewhere. As foreign businesses exit Beijing and domestic companies struggle to survive, merchants speak openly about their fears. Some say business hasn't been this bad in 3 decades. Others admit they are relieved only because their competitors suffer equally. No one is succeeding anymore. The cycle is brutal. Businesses close, jobs disappear, spending drops, and more businesses fail. It's a downward spiral that seems to accelerate with each passing month. Beijing, once the magnet of ambition for millions of dreamers, is now forcing many to confront an uncomfortable truth. Survival is no longer guaranteed. As people walk through quiet malls, silent food streets, and half-abandoned office towers, a feeling of mourning hangs in the air. They remember the crowds, the noise, the celebrations, the opportunities. They remember a Beijing filled with momentum and hope. And now, they repeat the same painful line across social media, across conversations, across dinner tables. I never imagined Beijing would become like this. The question now echoing across the nation is simple and terrifying. Is this a temporary winter, or the beginning of a collapse that will reshape China's capital forever?